Shall we get to the sermon? Okay, Joshua chapter 13. Joshua 13 and verse 1 says, Now Joshua was old and stricken in years, and the Lord said unto him, You are old and stricken in years. So, if you just stop right there, I wanted to give you a little something to laugh about because, you know, I don't know when this moment comes, but I guess we can metaphorically or proverbially apply this to ourselves. One day, God's going to show up and tell you, Man, you are old. You know? No, I love this verse. It cracks me up because it just simply points out that God walks up to Joshua. Well, he doesn't walk to him, of course. But God just appears to Joshua and just tells him, you know what? You are old. And there's still plenty to be done. And so this verse moves us into the story of Joshua. And it is a continuation of the conquest of the land of Canaan. And they have had a lot of success. And there are a lot of kings. If you look at the previous chapter, you have kind of like what Richard was talking about, like the begat stuff when he mentioned that earlier today, like a long list. You have a list of kings that have been conquered, but there's still more to be done. It didn't matter how old Joshua was. Didn't matter if he was getting ready to pass on the torch. Didn't matter that they had some success and there were some kings that had already been conquered, and didn't matter that they were tired of war. You know that they were tired of war. And how could you not be tired of war when you've seen so much blood? You're tired of work, tired of war, tired of tribulation, tired of challenges because we don't have all the details of Joshua's moving around, but it's not like God made it flowery with butterflies the whole time. It wasn't that way. That was not the reality. In fact, when they conquered Jericho, they were feeling pretty good because God handed it over to them in a certain way. Just a very, very obvious way. And then when they went to the very next city, the city of Ai, they failed in the first attempt. They had run into issues all along the way. So as we continue through the story of the conquest of the land of Canaan and Joshua, I'm going to now take you over into chapter 14 and notice something over there. I'm not skipping over the other stuff because it's no good, but we're sticking with the more story type of lessons where we can get some of the extraction out of those stories. So in Joshua chapter 14, beginning in verse 6, it says, Then the children of Judah came to Joshua in Gilgal, and Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, said unto him, You know the thing that the Lord said unto Moses, the man of God, concerning me and thee in Kadesh Barnea. 40 years old was I when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land, and I brought him word again as it was in mine heart. Nevertheless, My brethren that went up with me made the heart of the people melt. But I wholly followed the Lord my God. Now, I want to pause there just for a moment and refresh everyone's memories on what's going on right here. Caleb was promised a fruitful life in the land of Canaan because he was one of the few that showed courage when they went out to spy on the land of Canaan back in Numbers chapter 13 and 14. If it wasn't for all that had happened and the cowardice of the people, they would have been able to enter the land of Canaan right then and there if they had done it God's way. But as we can see, God is a patient God, and He's willing to uh, punish His people, or at least make His people wait for a while when they don't show the proper attitude of the proper faith. This would be pretty tough for someone like Caleb. Stop and think about it for a second now. When you know that you have the power of God on your side. If you know that God is able to make all things work together for good to them that love Him and are called according to His purpose. When you know that God wins every time, but your people are discouraged. But your people are afraid. But your people struggle. And even though you are fully aware of what we're capable of doing, you end up having to be held back because no one else is ready to jump in there with you. That'd be tough. And that's exactly where Caleb was. Let's go back to Numbers chapter 14 and recall what happens there. Numbers chapter 14. Now, I refreshed your memory just a moment ago about what took place. But the first couple of verses tell us the response of the people. This helps us remember and realize what they were going through. Numbers chapter 14, beginning in verse 1, it says, "And all the congregation lifted up their voice and cried, and the people wept that night. And all the children of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron. And the whole congregation said unto them, Did God desire that we had died in the land of Egypt? Would God we had died in this wilderness? Why has God brought us into this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and our children should be a prey? It would have been better for us to return into Egypt. And they said one to another, Let us make a captain, and let us return into Egypt. Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before the assembly of the congregation of the children of Israel. So that gives us an idea of the attitude of the people, the, the majority. But remember that there was a voice of hope that tried to still this chaos. There was a voice of hope that attempted to calm the people down. And that's back in chapter 13. Go with me to Numbers chapter 13, just a page back, and look at what it says. It says in verse 30, and Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it. But the man that went up with him said, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. Verse 32 says, and they brought up an evil report of the land which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, the land through which we have gone to search is a land that eats up the inhabitants thereof. And all the people that we saw in it were men of great stature. And there we saw the giants of the sons of Anak, which are giants. We were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. So Joshua and Caleb were the only two of the 12 spies that had the audacity to challenge the mob, even actually with a threat of being stoned to death because of it. Now, of course, they weren't killed for it, but God did step in to rebuke the people, and then they were cursed to wander for 40 years. As you can imagine now, Caleb's perspective and how, in his mind, he would have thought if we just together collectively had the faith, he wouldn't have had to been held back those 40 years. Because he had to hang out with the children of Israel and suffer with them. You know what I mean? That's tough. That's tough when you think about it. But he did it anyway. And I don't think that mattered to him so much. I think he probably had moments where he struggled, like anyone would. I think being human causes us to wonder about what's going to come to pass. Caleb probably looked around at the people. In fact, as a leader, he probably looked at his people often and said, yeah, if it wasn't for you guys doing this, we would have been there already by now. And he probably had to hold his tongue many a time. I think that's a very common thing. But when they all made it into the promised land, he probably would have known that it was worth it to hang out with his people and to patiently bear the brunt with his people. I'm going to take you to a proverb. Proverbs chapter 24. Proverbs chapter 24. I'm going to go into a couple of principles in this chapter. We're going to begin in verse 3. The whole chapter has a theme in it that is worth taking the time in your own time to read the whole chapter together. However, and that makes it unique to some of the other chapters in Proverbs because many of the Proverbs are unique and kind of stand alone. But this one has, from the beginning to the end, a bit of a theme. And verse 3 helps us establish that theme. So that's where we will begin. Through wisdom, a house is built, and by understanding, it is established. And by knowledge shall the chambers be filled with precious and pleasant riches. A wise man is strong, yea, a man of knowledge increases strength. So a house has to be built. If you're going to have a house, it has to be built. And there has to be a way to build that house, and there has to be strategy to build that house. There has to be work put in to build that house. But that's just it. It's work. And it's work to develop the wisdom to build that house. And that's what God is doing for us even yet still now today, because we are able to live in the house of the living God by the power of his Son. He builds this house. And he is the Father of this house. We are members and children in this house. But he wants us to also build by wisdom as well. Caleb cultivated that type of wisdom and courage. However, it did not come without issue. It didn't come without drama, which is exactly why wisdom is so appropriate and necessary, which is why patience is absolutely essential, and strength, which if the more of us cultivate that kind, the better things may and can be. Even though there will always be troubles and obstacles in the way. Go down a couple of verses with me. Look at how the wise man continues to instruct on the building of the house. Verse 10. If you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small. I love Solomon, and I'm going to share this with you because I share it with my family all the time. They're probably tired of hearing it. I love what I call Solomon logic. We did a study in the book of Proverbs a while back. I was teaching a Bible study, and we were just going proverb by proverb. And you know how some of his proverbs are kind of funny because they're almost too obvious. Like, a man who has a deceitful tongue will pour out lies. It's like, well, thank you, Captain Obvious. Like these kinds of some of these proverbs are just so obvious, and so I would actually use that as a kind of a humorous way to get people to stop and think about it. So why would he write it then? And the reason why is because if it's so obvious, then why are we having trouble with it still? You know what I mean? And that's why I like to use that kind of logic. I do it, and I use that kind of logic when I train my kids. You know the best way to have a good day? Have a good day. How does it feel to feel good? Good. It feels good to feel good. How does it feel to feel bad? They don't feel that feels bad. So why feel bad? Who's in control of your feeling? Ain't nobody but you. So I call that Solomon logic. If you have a deceitful tongue, you're going to speak lies. And then he uses that logic right here in this verse, in verse 10. If you faint in the day of adversity, you're weak. That's pretty much what he's saying. If you're not strong, then you're weak. So what does it take to not be weak? Get strong. How does it take, or what does it take to learn wisdom? Learn, pursue, develop, cultivate. This is easy stuff. This is simple stuff. I preached a sermon a while back. It was on a Sunday evening. I preached a sermon. And it was right here in this pulpit where Jesus says, "My yoke is easy and my burden is light." It's we and our believing of lies that messes with us. So let's go ahead and let the wisdom of God continue to teach us to be strong and to be builders of the house and to patiently bear the burdens one of another at the same time, because we, in the day of adversity, are not called just to be there for ourselves, but to be there for one another. And I'm going to show you what that means in verse 11. So we just read verse 10 when it says, if you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small. Verse 11, he says, if you forbear to deliver them that are drawn to death. And that is such a real verse for people during this period of time, because people would be delivered to death unlawfully in an unjust system in those days. So that's real. That's a big deal. Verse 11 says that basically, if you're quiet when your brother or when somebody is getting ready to be killed unlawfully or to be persecuted or to be prosecuted, and you faint in that moment, then your strength is small. Verse 12, he says, if you say, behold, we knew it not. Does not he that ponders the heart consider it? And he that keeps your soul, does he not know it? Shall not he render to every man according to his works? I want you to take note of what we have read and what I have prompted you to think about here today by the power and the wisdom that God had recorded for us to read, because this is in your Bible and it's in there for a reason. This is great wisdom pouring forth from the lips of the Almighty, that it is the duty of the strong to be there for the weak. And if we say, well, I didn't know, that doesn't matter because God knows. And so we're building. And as we build, we must continue to build with not only wisdom, but strength and also courage, just like Caleb did, because Caleb spoke up when no one else would, besides his buddy Joshua. But don't worry and don't fret, because verse 16 also exists. which says that a just man falls 7 times and rises up again, but the wicked shall fall into mischief. You're starting to see how it's kind of connected together with some theme. There's a theme going on here. And then he says in verse 17. Now, verse 16, I don't want to skip over that too quickly now. Because if you fall and you are a just man, it don't matter if you fall 7 times. If you fall 7 times, how many times do you get up? 7 times. And that is each and every one of us. If we are a just man or a just woman, when we fall, we get back up. And we're willing to do that for the weak also, and we're willing to build even though we fall when we build, because we must build with God's wisdom. And this is his wisdom, to fall and to stand back up. But also notice verse 17. Rejoice not when your enemy falls, and let not your heart be glad when he stumbles. There are multiple models in which we can apply these lessons. My responsibility is to bring you the eternal application of these, which is why I speak mostly about building the church, building the house of God, and being in his family with him as the Father. But in this, sprinkled throughout this, there's also the building of a house. I don't know if you've noticed yet, but there is a bit of a Father's Day theme. I take this very seriously, for I try to build with wisdom. But we were also citizens of a country as well. And our country is divided, and our brother Jerry made sure to announce that we need to pray during these kinds of times. We need to pray for our leaders, and we need to pray for people that are suffering. We have wars going on as well. And in the news, because it's so polarized, in the news, when somebody fumbles with the way they speak, the opposing news will rejoice about that. When some people get hurt, or when some people don't have their plans go according to how they thought they ought to go, and animosity starts to take place, and darkness and evil starts to reign in the hearts of men, and Satan will surely use these kinds of things to try to work his way into the hearts of the Christian, who needs to take a little bit more notes from the way Jesus conducted himself. Because when Jesus was approached, he would say, Caesar? He'd be, Caesar who? I don't care about that guy. That's not what I'm here about. He would just say, well, just, you know what? He would very almost kind of haphazardly, well, give me a coin. Let me see the coin. Whose face is on it? Okay, whatever. I'm not here for that. I have a different kingdom that I have come for. And it is very important for each and every one of us to learn and know that this verse 17 is just as applicable to us now as it was then. When our enemies fall, whoever your enemy might be, that's not a time to rejoice, according to the wisdom of Solomon here. We get too wrapped around the axle sometimes. And then the follow-up verse is verse 18, which says, lest the Lord see it and it displease him, and he turn away his wrath from him. According to that, our reaction at the fall of the wicked can actually affect the way God handles it. That's interesting, I would say. So we are tied up and connected to many things and to many kinds of people. We have wisdom that the Holy Scriptures brings to our ears and to our minds and ought to sink deep down that they may also reach into our heart and take root so that we may with confidence behave and live this life and to keep building. So now I'm going to take you to another proverb to bring out another interesting concept. Go back to chapter 14. And while you're turning back there, just keep in mind that there would have been a political type of agenda and situation for the children of Israel when they were getting ready to wander for 40 years, just like we have the same type of social issues today. Because they were getting ready to try to overthrow that government and try to go back to Egypt. You know, it's pretty interesting when you think about it. And so, what I want to share with you now is verse 4, Proverbs chapter 14 and verse 4. It says, "Where no oxen are, the crib is clean, but much increase is by the strength of the ox." So, you can apply this in multiple ways as well, but for today, I'm going to bring it in a couple different ways. First off, Caleb was stuck with his people. And it was by God's grace, his mercy, and his wisdom that he spared the people. Uh, and you know what? Caleb just had to deal with it. And so the way I'm going to apply it here is where no people are, the crib is clean. But you know what? We have to deal with people. The only way to not deal with people is to be isolated and to be a hermit. And that's just the way it, and there's no relationship that I know of where this does not apply. If you want people in your life, you're going to have issues. That's true here. It's true in the church. It's true in family. A father can say this. Where no kids are, man, life was easy. Kids come along, sweet mercy. Life is very different. But there can come many great blessings as a result of being around people and having kids as well. So now I want to take you back to where we began in the book of Joshua. And this time we will move a little bit more into the chapter that we left from, and that's chapter 14. Joshua chapter 14. And what I'm going to do as we finish up the lesson here is I'm going to tie it all up and let you know the secrets of what happens in my mind when I write sermons sometimes and how things just kind of connect or disconnect, however you want to look at it. But I didn't actually plan on talking a whole lot about Father's Day in my lesson today. But I've been moving through the book of Joshua, and the themes just kind of come up. Lessons, ideas just kind of come up. And building a house, but the fact that drama comes along with all that, and issues and struggles, pain, heartache, but also triumphs come up. But what cracked me up was the next phase of the book of Joshua that I'm coming out of started in chapter 13, verse 1, when God simply tells Joshua, "You are old." And you know what's funny? I did not start aging until I became a father. Nothing has made me feel more old. And so I thought to myself, that'll work out just fine for this Sunday. I'll just kind of move into a little bit of a Father's Day theme. Because even though to some of you who knew me before I was even born, I'm still a baby, I feel older now than I did 20 years ago. So I thought, you know what? That'll work out just fine. And then we started talking about Caleb and how Caleb had to deal with his people and was stuck for 40 years because of his people. And if his people would just simply have just been there with him, it wouldn't have been that way. But God still took care of Caleb. He still took care of his people, and he's not going to stop now just because things may seem grim sometimes. He is not going to stop taking care of his people. Even if some people may slow things down, God knows what's going on, and his timing is perfect, and he makes all things beautiful in his time. And he can make all things work together for good to those who love him and are called according to his purpose. And then, as I was talking about, or reading about Caleb, and he reminds Joshua of some of these things, watch what he says. Verses 9, 10, and 11 mainly. Watch this. And Moses swore on that day, saying, "Surely the land whereon your feet have trodden shall be your inheritance and your children's forever, because you have wholly followed the Lord my God." Now watch what Caleb says. "And now behold, the Lord has kept me alive, as he said, these 45 years, even since the Lord spoke this word unto Moses, while the children of Israel wandered in the wilderness. And now, lo, I am this day 85 years old. As yet, I am as strong this day as I was in the day that Moses sent me. As my strength was then, even so is my strength now for war, both to go out and to come in." And I just thought that was so cool. That Caleb would simply say, "I might be older, but I'm still strong." And so, this lesson is designed to be an encouragement that no matter what we have to deal with, no matter the people we have to deal with, no matter how long it takes, if you have God, you have youth and eternity. And if you don't have that, then come forth and become a part of his family while we stand and sing.